Social music talk.
Even though it's a very small market, we have a very big digital footprint because Tom's smart enough to know that that's the world we live in. So we stream 24/7 at KOZT.com. We have apps for iPhones and Androids. We're on TuneIn. We're on Google Play and Amazon Echo. So we have listeners all over the country and all over the world. You know, it has a really big imprint for the size of the station. So it's a really interesting situation.
As far as the signal, how far does that go?
Signal just covers Mendocino County proper and a little bit into Lake County, which is the county east of us.
So so then pretty much your audience is Fort Bragg and just the little towns in Mendocino.
Well, yeah, Fort Bragg, Ukiah, Mendocino. So it's all Mendocino County and a little bit into Lake County. That's the terrestrial signal.
Right.
But we have a lot of listeners in the Bay Area. We have a lot of listeners, as I said, all over California, all over the country. We have. I recently was lucky enough to take a trip to a vacation to Europe. And there's a guy who's a dedicated listener who lives in Paris. And I was in Paris and I was going to get together with him.
Wow.
I was really looking forward to it because I thought, wow, this is the power of radio.
Yeah, really.
But like the day before we were supposed to get together, he had a scooter accident and broke his arm. So I didn't get together with him. But it is really incredible the reach that we have for being such a small market.
Well, it could be that you do an amazing mix of music based on how you've described it so far. It's like you covered just about every decade, right, going back to the 60s?
Yeah, actually, we do. We even go back a little bit, you know, prior to that. We play some pre-rock stuff will come up. And that's just sort of a little bit of spice thrown in. But it is a very unique format. There's no doubt about it. For a commercial station, keeping in mind we're not a non-com, you know, we are a commercial station.
Has it ever been considered a triple A, or has it always been considered more of an album rock station?
I think for the purpose of the trades, you might think of it as sort of a triple A hybrid.
Okay.
Although I know that Tom, our owner, who's also the PD, he would never call it a triple A.
Okay.
But I would think maybe if you were trying to put it in a classification for the music trade.
Right. It's not a typical active rock station.
Oh, it's not active rock at all. No.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
So you do play a lot of classic.
We do play a lot of classic artists, but we don't tend to play the the usual suspects in terms of tracks.
Right.
We go a lot deeper in tracks. We also, the policy is every day is a no repeat day. We don't repeat a song in the course of a day ever. So it's not like we have we do play new stuff, but we don't have rotations or anything like that for new music. It's really about trying to continuously rotate through the library, which is quite extensive.
Does the station have?
It's a throwback. It's kind of a throwback to old school radio,
right?
And also in terms of the approach of how the breaks are structured, and it's not a PPM market. We don't have to worry about that type of thing.
Okay. So do you even have a competitor?
Well, sure. There's other stations in this county, in this market, but I think we literally have more listeners than all the other stations combined, which is a relative statement. It's a small market, but
you got the coolest looking logo.
yeah, we have a shark logo. Shark with glasses, and
that looks
his
cool.
name is Teeth Richards.
All right, Teeth Richards.
Teeth with a T.
Right.
It's a joke.
I get it. So
it's a cool station.
So then it has a heritage vibe. Everybody knows it in the region, is what it sounds like.
Very much so. And we do have, being in sort of a remote area, we have in the wintertime, sometimes there are, there's storms and power outages. And of course, lately we've had to deal with
Oh yeah,
wildfires and power shutoffs and things like that. And the coast has really become the go-to for news and information, just in general, but especially when in times of crisis. But Rogalski, the news guy, like I say, he's been here 25 years, so he is the voice of news and information in Mendocino County. It's interesting. I've only been here a year and a half,
okay.
so I'm the baby.
Yeah.
But it is really a firmly entrenched station in the community. Like I say, it's kind of a throwback to the way radio used to be.
Kind of like the 70s, 80s AOR.
Well, I don't know. It's just in terms of where it sits in the community, it's just kind of a throwback to pre-digital days, pre-Napster days when your options for music content were more limited.
Back when radio actually was that one of those major choices that, a top of mind choice.
Right.
So,
yeah. I'm not big on, living in the past or indulging too much in nostalgia. Things change, the whole business has changed. The whole paradigm has changed. It's just a different world from when I started. But it is kind of interesting to be at a station where it is sort of a throwback to those days.
Well, that's why it fits into this show, because I'm doing this special series called A Century of Radio, because 2020 is the 100th anniversary of, I guess, what you'd call commercial radio. And I'm doing a series of interviews and stories, and anyone who has an interesting history. And even though I know what you're saying about nostalgia, that's always, it's always better to live in the present, but it's always fun to talk about stories of the past. And I do want to talk about some of your history here. You actually started at a pretty legendary station, I think, for Northern California, and that was KTIM back in the early 80s.
Yeah, the old KTIM. That Tim stood for This Is Marin, because it was, and I think it still is, the only radio license in Marin County, which is, for people who don't know, is the first county north when you go over the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. I don't even know what that station is these days. It's still there. The signal's still there. So yeah, I started at KTIM right after I got out of college, and I went to Chico State and started my college radio career there. It was a great group of people. There's a bunch of people, several of whom I worked with at college radio, who went on to have really interesting radio careers as radio professionals. And KTIM, when I started, was still one of the last of the free-form FM stations in the Bay Area. I was actually there when it transitioned out of that, which has kind of been a story of my career. I've done that with a lot of stations, it seems. So it was still, an underground, free-form station. I started as a part-timer, and I worked up to full-time, and my very first full-time job was as the overnight DJ at KTIM. It was midnight to 6, 5 nights a week. So it was 6 hours, middle of the night, and it was kind of free-form. We had this big library. It was all vinyl. That's how long ago it was. Mm-hmm. And there was really no rules other than we played a lot of different genres of music, and you weren't allowed to stay in any one for more than a couple songs. You had to keep moving around.
Okay.
But other than that, it was just free form. And so I spent 6 hours a night picking out vinyl to play, just like the kids do today.
Now, how about by the time you got to 91X in San Diego, 1986, you were a morning co-host. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, that was a couple stations later. I didn't start out as a morning co-host. You know, I started out as a part-timer. Max Tolkoff was the program director.
He's been on this show.
I was working. Yeah, well, what show hasn't Max been on? Come on, he has his own podcast.
That's
as you
right.
know.
That's right.
I was working in Santa Rosa, which is a small station I had a small station in Santa Rosa, which is the next county north from Marin.
Mm-hmm.
And 91X was one of my dream stations. You know, that and K-Rock were the stations that I really wanted to work at, because at that time those were kind of the only stations that were playing, you know, alternative, what came to be called alternative rock.
Right.
And I sent him a demo, and he called me up, and he said, you know, I've got I don't have a full-time job for you. I have a part-time job though. So I quit my full-time job in Santa Rosa and moved down to San Diego for a part-time job, because it was 91X and it was like the big time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then they were having some problems with the morning show, and I convinced the program director at the time, who was Trip Reeb, to let me audition as the news guy sidekick on the morning show, which was called The Breakfast Club, by the way, which, believe it or not, at the time was kind of a hip name.
Right.
It was before the movie.
Okay.
It was before the movie and all that. They put me on full time, and so I was part of the Breakfast Club morning show for a couple of years. And our studios were still in Tijuana at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So to do your air shift, you had to drive over the border into Mexico, up the hill in Tijuana, and we did all of our broadcasting from Mexico. It was literally Mexican radio.
And so, like, what are some great memories from that era?
This is on the internet, right? So I can talk about anything.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, it was you know, it's kind of crazy being down in Mexico. A lot of zany things happened. One thing we did was we used to do this yearly festival show called X Fest. Right. And because part of the whole arrangement with working in Mexico was to keep our partners, because the transmitter was owned by a Mexican company, so technically we were just, you know, sort of renting it.
Mm-hmm.
We had the X Fest down in Mexico when you're at the bullfighting ring, and we called it Mex Fest. Mm-hmm. And it was good. We had it was the Fix and Oingo Boingo and a couple other bands, and it was at the bullfighting ring in Tijuana. Cool. So it was just the whole going over the border, going back and forth over the border, made it a really kind of surreal experience. And eventually, first they moved the morning show up to San Diego, and eventually they changed the arrangement so that the entire station could broadcast from San Diego. But when I started down there, we were all driving into Mexico to do our shifts, and that was Max, that was Mike Halloran, Oz Medina, people like that.
Social music.